Your power bill has gone up. Across the United States, residential electricity has risen more than 36% since 2020, from around 12.75 cents a kilowatt hour to over 17. You didn't use more. You didn't change anything. The number just moved. There are several reasons, and the usual suspects are all real. Fuel costs, storm damage, aging infrastructure that needed replacing anyway. But there's a newer one that almost nobody's bill mentions, and in some places it has become the dominant one. In regions dense with data centers, wholesale electricity prices have jumped by as much as 267% in 5 years. To see why that lands on your bill rather than theirs, you need to know how electricity pricing actually works, and it's not like buying anything else. A regulated utility doesn't set prices by supply and demand in the way a shop does. It calculates what it costs to run and maintain the system, adds an approved rate of return, and then spreads that total across its customers. The critical word is spreads. Most of the cost of the grid isn't the electricity at all. It's the poles, wires, substations, and transmission lines. The capacity to deliver power at the worst moment of the worst day. That's shared infrastructure, and its cost is shared, allocated across everyone connected to it by formulas that were designed for a world of houses, shops, and factories. Now introduce a customer that behaves like nothing that formula anticipated. A large data center can draw as much power as a small city, continuously at a constant rate, and it wants to be connected within a couple of years. Two things follow. The first is capacity. Grid operators run auctions to secure enough generation to meet peak demand with a safety margin. Add enormous new demand faster than new power plants can be built, and the price in those auctions rises sharply for everybody because it's a single market clearing at a single price. Your household didn't bid against a data center for electrons, but the price you pay was set in an auction that the data center's demand helped clear. The second is the physical build-out. Connecting a facility on that scale requires new transmission, new substations, sometimes new generation entirely. Someone has to pay for that steel and copper. And the default arrangement in most places, inherited from decades when new large customers were factories that employed thousands of local people, is that grid upgrades go into the shared cost base and get recovered from all ratepayers. That was a reasonable bargain when the new arrival was a mill hiring the town. It's a less obvious one when the new arrival is a warehouse of servers with a few dozen staff, and the scale is not marginal. Data centers are projected to consume somewhere between roughly 7 and 12% of all electricity in the United States by 2028. Turning an entire new industry the size of a mid-sized country's power consumption onto a grid that was planned around gently declining demand is not a rounding error. Utilities had spent years forecasting flat or falling consumption because efficiency improvements had been quietly winning. Those forecasts are now comprehensively wrong, and everything built on them, investment plans, rate cases, retirement schedules for old plants, has to be redone at speed. You can see the effect most sharply where the concentration is highest. In the areas with the densest data center development, retail prices have risen dramatically, in some markets by well over 90% since 2021. Those are the places where the abstraction becomes a household's monthly bill and a genuinely political problem, which is exactly what it has become. There are now serious fights in state regulatory hearings over a question that sounds technical and isn't. Should very large new customers pay the full cost of the infrastructure they require? The proposals go by names like large load tariffs, special rate classes for enormous customers, with minimum payment guarantees so that if a facility is cancelled or shrinks, the ratepayers aren't left holding a substation built for it. Several states have adopted versions, others are fighting about it now. The industry's counter-argument deserves a fair hearing because it isn't empty. Data centers pay enormous electricity bills, and those payments contribute to the fixed costs of the system, which in principle spreads them across a larger base and can lower everyone's share. They pay substantial property taxes, often into small rural jurisdictions that badly need the revenue. And some operators are funding new generation directly, signing long-term contracts for renewables, or, in a few cases, paying to restart or build nuclear capacity that wouldn't otherwise exist. A very large customer who genuinely brings their own power is not the same problem as one who simply plugs in. Some operators have gone further and tried to step outside the grid argument entirely. There have been deals to restart retired nuclear plants to serve a single customer, contracts underwriting new reactors, and facilities built with their own generation on site, what the industry calls behind the meter. In principle, that's the cleanest answer available. Bring your own power and the shared cost question largely disappears. In practice, it's slow, it's expensive, and it only applies to a fraction of what's being built. Most data centers still plug into the same wires as everyone else. There's a resource question sitting alongside the electricity one that gets less airtime, which is water. Many of these facilities are cooled evaporatively, consuming substantial volumes, and a number of them have been sited in places where water was already contested. That cost doesn't show up on a power bill at all. It shows up in a local water table, a river extraction license, or a municipal supply argument, which makes it easier to overlook and harder to price. And it's worth making the comparison that local officials increasingly make themselves. Historically, when a community absorbed the cost of a new industrial connection, the trade was employment. A plant drawing that much power employed thousands of people. A data center of equivalent draw typically employs a few dozen once construction finishes. The property taxes can still be genuinely transformative for a small jurisdiction, so the deal isn't necessarily bad. But it's a different deal from the one the cost-sharing rules were written for, and pretending otherwise is what generates the backlash. The trouble is the timing mismatch. The bill increases arrive now. The offsetting benefits arrive later if the facility gets built as planned, stays as long as promised, and uses as much power as forecast. Ratepayers are effectively extending credit against a projection. There's also a wrinkle that makes the numbers slippery, which is that a good deal of this demand is speculative. Developers submit connection requests to multiple utilities for the same project while deciding where to build. That means the queue of requested capacity is significantly larger than what will actually be constructed. The same project counted several times. Utilities planning against those queues risk building for demand that never materializes, and the cost of that overbuild lands, again, in the shared rate base. There's one more asymmetry worth naming. A household has almost no ability to negotiate its electricity rate. You pay the tariff for your class, and that's the end of it. A customer drawing the power of a small city negotiates directly, often confidentially, sometimes with the terms sealed on commercial grounds. So the parties with the least ability to influence the price are the ones absorbing the shared costs, and the party with the most leverage is the one whose arrival created them. That imbalance is what the regulatory fights are actually about, underneath the technical language. So the honest position sits between the two loudest ones. Data centers are not the sole cause of rising bills. The increase since 2020 has multiple sources and would have happened to some degree regardless. But in specific regions, they are now a major driver, and the deeper issue is structural rather than moral. The rules for sharing grid costs were written for a different kind of customer, and they haven't been updated for one that arrives at the scale of a city and the speed of a warehouse. Which is why this is worth paying attention to even if you never think about AI at all. The technology arrives as an app on your phone, apparently free. The infrastructure behind it arrives as a line item on the electricity bill of everyone connected to the same grid, whether or not they ever open the app. Which leaves a question worth carrying. When something is described as free, who did the cost actually get sent to? And did anyone ask them first?